Hello, dear readers. It is Phil Svitek, joined alongside Marisa Serafini, and today we are discussing Directed by James Burrows, as written by James Burrows. This is a slight departure for anyone who's been kind of following us in our monthly book club discussions, where we read fiction. Each month, I or Marisa chooses a book, and we read it, and we come on here and discuss it and really break it down. And it's a lot of fun, and we appreciate you. And by just that description alone, we get into a lot of spoilers. But this, as mentioned, is a departure for us because this is a nonfiction book. But Marisa and I both love TV. We love movies. And so we figured it might be fun because James Burrows, for those of you who don't know, is the director of amazing, legendary sitcoms such as Taxi, Cheers, Frasier, and then I imagine more so for myself and Marisa, Friends, Will and Grace, also things like The Big Bang Theory. He's done a few episodes there. So I figured this might be fun. Why not, right? Just kind of a nice book to round out the summer. And just to kind of give you a preview, so we'll talk about the book. We'll also talk about stuff we've been reading outside of, our duties here, and then we'll preview what we're going to be reading in the coming months so you can join alongside with us, right? So without further ado, let me kick it to you, Marisa, for your just initial reactions to the book itself.
Yeah, officially, I was kind of excited to read this because, I knew of James Burrows, Jimmy Burrows, mostly because I was a big fan of Friends, big fan of Will and Grace. And so that name was very synonymous with sitcoms. And so I knew of him already. Reading this, and admittedly, I love my fiction. I very, very rarely do I read nonfiction, and especially autobiographies. And when I do read autobiographies, they're usually about women. Mostly because, in my opinion, I find women's stories more compelling and intriguing and more relatable for me being a woman to see their struggles and how they got to where they are in their level of success, quote unquote. And then reading this, I was like, I couldn't really relate to it as much as I wanted to. And we'll get into it. It's like, it did take me a while to get into this book. It's like, I appreciated that the book is broken down basically by TV shows and his different eras of which show, this decade he directed Cheers, this decade he did Taxi, X, Y, and Z. But being a millennial and being more of a fan of Friends and Will and Grace, which is later, quote unquote, in his career, it took a while for me to actually really enjoy this book because we didn't get Friends until page 300. I'm like, let's get there, and we didn't get Will and Grace till 320, and the book is almost over. And so I appreciate that he did highlight a lot of his bigger shows, or I wouldn't say bigger, but his more loved shows for him personally. And I can't imagine a lot of millennials, Gen Zers, any other generation that's born behind 1900 and in the 2000s of reading this book. This is definitely catered for the older Gen Xers and for the boomers. Not to say that people of our age can't enjoy this book, but I don't think it's written for us.
Yeah, I think having a greater sense of all those shows, like Frasier was probably the one that, I haven't seen as much as, let's say, Friends, but at least I've seen various episodes, so I can start to kind of grasp there. And I kind of knew that going into it for me. I just, wanted to appreciate television history and not be just in my own bubble of what I like. So I wanted to kind of expand that. I will give him credit because it did make me want to go and check out these shows. It got me interested. So I think that's a big thing. I think Cheers, or I might start with Frasier, since that's one I already have an entry point, and maybe kind of work backwards towards Cheers. And Cheers also because it's got the Boston connection. That's one of those that, I think could be fun for me to revisit. because I'm not sure if you've been to the Cheers bar in Boston specifically, but as he talks about, like, they stole this bar in Boston to use as their own, and then as the show got so big, the place actually became called Cheers. So it's a fiction create a real life thing. Anyway, I digress. But I agree. I think the hard part for me was, like, I like the early on chapters of him with his father and getting into the theater business and kind of breaking into it. But as the chapters kind of went on, it was a lot of, first off, there was a lot of segues into, like, I know we're talking about Cheers and whatever else, but then he's talking about stuff that will happen later, or stuff that might have happened earlier, or stuff that's just completely random. And so there are threads that I'm like, wait, where are we getting to? So there's not like a through line necessarily for each of the chapters, which, again, like they are, as you said, they're quite literally framed like, hey, here's the TV show era. Like, they're named after, if we're going to talk about Cheers, the chapter is called Cheers. And yet we talk about 800 other things. So I think there's a bit of a, I don't know. I just had a problem with that overall. And I would have liked it to be, I don't know, just a little bit more sort of, like, I think it was inside baseball and it did teach you enough stuff. And I, like, overall earmarked enough pages to, like, stuff that I got out of it. Not that it needed to be an instructional book, but I was looking for that wisdom and that guidance. And not that, like, the anecdotes were bad. I just loved them when they were paired with a story of what to take away, right? And I don't know for you, but I was a little bit disappointed by the Friends chapter, which I know he didn't, like, work on Friends for a very long time, but it just kind of like, here's how it started. Here's how we cast the people. Oh, let me talk about my daughters. And then the chapter ends. But I think he does make it up. Let me know your perspective. I think he really makes up for a lot of stuff for me personally with the Will and Grace stuff. I thought, like, you could tell his love for that show really oozed on the page and what it meant to create and work on that show.
Right. I totally agree. And I'm glad he finally highlighted Friends and Will and Grace later on in the book. But I think the thing is, with great things we talked about in the book, is that he actually went into the character development. He explained why these characters became iconic, or, like, the political aspects behind Will and Grace, and why that was such a generational turning point for the queer community. Why Friends was such a turning point for young adults just trying to figure out who you are, because those are universal themes that everyone can relate to. And Will and Grace was such a turning point because even in the last 20, 30 years of media television, LGBTQIA plus community wasn't well represented. And this was one of the first better represented stories and television out there. So, like, you can see where the generations were churning, and what we were allowing on the media and mainstream. And what my biggest issue in this book was I found like he was having a hard time. He was constantly name dropping. I was like, are you saying that for clout, or to establish credibility of all the people you worked with in your entire career, or who you might have some connection to just because, like, you were part of the network at this time? Like, and then he would, like, just cater, he would drop like 15 names and then be like, oh, this character did this because I'm an actor's director, and, like, this little moment and nuance that the actor put into this line made the character more memorable. But it's like, I could change, I can, like, turn to, like, a random page and there's all these names that he's dropped. It's like, no one's gonna remember who they are. That's like, okay.
So let me push back just a little bit. But I get what you're saying. Names. I agree with you that so many names were dropped. My issue isn't, like, I don't mind the sentiment behind it. Like, I like getting to peek behind the curtain. And I do appreciate when he kind of, like, quote unquote, talk shit about certain people. Like, we were going to cast this person, but she, he didn't have what we were looking for, or like, for example, he really like went after Rob Schneider and was like,
yeah, he did.
you know?
He's like,
So,
he was not
listen,
great.
I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I think the problem for me became he name dropped and it became confusing. So when you're in Cheers, like once you was, and this happened, I'm just using it as an example, but once you're inside of it and you name me the actor who they're playing, then just create a consistency. Either you're going to call him as their character name or their actual name. And I don't mind either, just stick with it. And I think this to me kind of encapsulates the whole thing. There was a point where I forget if it's the brothers or the bros, but he said, moving forward, I'm going to call, I think it was with Max Muchnick and David, the creator of Will and Grace. He said, moving forward, I'm going to call them, and I think it was the bros, because it's simpler and blah, blah, blah. And they are like brothers to me or whatever. And then literally within that same page, he started calling them different things. And he would either call him Muchnick or Max or this and that. So it's like, just stay consistent. If you're going to have that amount of names, just stay consistent. That's all I ask for. So I didn't mind the name dropping. I just minded that like we literally kept shifting who was who. And if someone's like Brandon Tarakovsky, apologies that I'm mispronouncing the name, but he called him Brandon at points, Tarakovsky. So it's just stay consistent. That's all I ask.
Right. Oh god, there were just so many names, and like I like to think I'm actually really good in names, but there were hundreds of names that he dropped, and most of the time it was mostly because like they didn't really add anything. It's like NBC's head production person was this person at the time of this, and then followed up by this person. We're like, how is this relevant to you right now? That's just the person at that time, sure, but then it was like but it doesn't matter anymore. So like he would just name drop. This person was friends with this person. Okay, was this friend part of the show? It's just like, oh my god, and I was getting lost between just all these names that some are recognizable, some aren't. If you're above the age of 50, you might recognize these names. If you're not, then like it totally goes over my head. But it was just the hard balance of the people he was working with compared to the people whose careers he quote unquote built, compared to the people whose characters on screen became more iconic that people know now more than the actors. It's like, and his delineation between being an actor's director and a writer director. I'm like, what part of your career are you trying to base upon? Because you're naming everybody, but how were you impactful to them in each division of their lives? I was getting so confused.
Fair. And I agree. I don't necessarily knock that. I do want to, I don't know. I'm going to guess that your sensibility is correct me if I'm wrong, but that we appreciated the craft, right? Like I wanted to learn various things. And there was one particular chapter before the Will and Grace chapter, I think it might have been after, where he kind of summarizes all the rest of the shows and years that he's worked on. That really is kind of like, hey, here, I'm going to lay a lot of knowledge on you. And so I appreciate, like, for example, a big takeaway for me was make sure that the sitcom itself works as quote unquote a play, and then add the cameras after. Mm-hmm. It's a different medium than movies where you think about both things kind of at the same time. And I don't know, A, did that resonate with you? B, did you like those kind of tidbits? And if so, what did you take away? Or were you interested in something else completely out of the book?
No, I completely agree. I loved when he finally did get to the production aspect, because you and I were both filmmakers in our own right. So once we waded through all the names and he actually got to the nitty gritty nuances of the actual technical part of filming and the character development, like even the moments where like Norm from Cheers sat in a specific position at the bar because he was more outgoing and he could face everyone, just even those little details that most people wouldn't think of. And the blocking of cameras is like, get the beats of the joke correct and then throw in your angles afterwards. Like figure out, and then the differences between there are two different types of audience that you're catering to. The people live in the studio that has to hit the humor first, compared to the people who are out in the world watching this after the fact. So like just going back and forth between those production aspects and the choices that he made when it came to acting and directing and all the technical aspects, I appreciated. And the different things that he covered in his career, I also appreciate too as a director, because I mean, man, he saw a lot of things. Like Taxi was, you know, all these different cars and the different the separation between like the driver and the person behind, and there's like literally a partition, you know, so like how to cater through like literal walls and obstacles, compared to Friends, which was an open scene. And even the moment with one of the most iconic episodes where like he purposely placed cameras in two different locations so we can get real-time reactions, which he never did. You know, so like the technical aspect that goes into it makes me appreciate what went behind the sitcom more so than the names of who were attached, but the actions that were put into what went on screen.
Yeah, and a big one for me was like he was not a fan of yelling cut, right? And the reason for that was once you yell cut, the audience that is there watching this sitcom kind of was like, oh, you know, there's this odd break. And so instead he would just essentially keep rolling and just back it up to a more usable line. That resonates with me because I tend to try to work like that as much as I can. You know, and so forth. So there was a lot that, yeah, a lot of the stuff that I end up just kind of, you know, earmarking is very much in that sense. But it is also interesting kind of switching topics when he does talk about the cultural significance. And that's where, again, with Will and Grace, I just felt like he just oozed something different off the page because of what it meant. And he provides that context of when same-sex marriage became legal. And even though obviously I've lived through it, just seeing that and given a date of 2015 and stuff like that, like it's like, wait, 2015? That seems not long ago at all.
No, it wasn't.
Right? So it's just wild to see it in that perspective, right? I don't know that I just have to highlight the Will and Grace chapter in and of itself because it seemed to transcend for whatever reason. For me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It hit a different emotional level when it came to the Will and Grace, which unfortunately was one of the last chapter of the book. It's like you can joke, you know, say the best for last, but I think that's also the reason why Will and Grace is so important is because out of all the shows he's done so far, that was a reboot. Like it was so important even when it first aired. And it resonates now that they even brought it back for a reboot. So like it continues to still be important and relevant. And I think that to have a career as long as he did and to have a second chance at something that he was so well involved in the first time, it really just shows like, hey, we got to do this again. And I got to appreciate it even more this time. And the thing you appreciate about Will and Grace, when it first aired, it was before same-sex marriage was accepted, was legal. And when the reboot came back, it was legal. So it's like even culturally, we have shifted like what we allow to be on media, what we allow to be in our regular lives. And just there is even more acceptance of Will and Grace this time around. And I was a big fan of Will and Grace when it first aired too, because I was like, I have all the seasons. I do own it. So I watched them when it first came around. And then to watching it come back, I also watched it in real time. But even the reboot was way more political than the first time around. I admit, like they hit more emotionally deeper topics of the country at that time. Even in the late 90s and early 2000s when it first aired, it was still like they touched upon it, but they just like grazed the surface of the important topics, but they didn't really dive deep down of what the reboot did. And and I think his second time of coming around to this show, like he really got to embrace the show and go deeper deeper, farther into the show than he was allowed the first time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that he overall does a really good job of highlighting is how hard it is to blend all of these elements of just everything, right? The script, the actors, even the time slot at which you're on, things of that nature. So, there was all those elements, and then for them to navigate the trickiness of both wanting to obviously have an audience and build that audience and be subversive, but at the same time not too submersive enough where people would tune out. That's a very fine balancing act, and so to be able to pull it off, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to read this, memoir autobiography, is because to have the level of success that he did is incredible. Now, he does make a joke at a certain point, like that when he got into the business, it was almost required to be a white Jewish man.
Yeah.
And even seeing, like, it is interesting, like, later on he highlights all the people and the crew that he's worked with, whether it's the editors or the camera people and stuff like that. And I appreciate that he highlights them and that they are so close knit, but it was very interesting how many of the people were just men, and I imagine probably white men. So,
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking him. Obviously, that's not his fault. I think as much as he could, I think he tried to bring about various change. And, you get the sensibility just in his writing, even from the early chapters, because he talks about his mother and his father, that they were very progressive, and he's tried to, instill that in the way that he works. But yeah, so it's nice to see the industry change, but it also just goes, as you're pointing out, how much things seem to change and yet they don't.
Right. I'm glad you brought it up because
Sure, I got
reading
you.
it, yes, I was like, yeah, you already know. Because reading it, that's what I had a hard time connecting to, and that's why I connect to women autobiographies more than men, especially this guy. I'm gonna say he is a white man who was born in privilege, and you and I are both in the industry, and we know how hard it is for people who weren't born into a family who has connections, what, based off of nepotism, because his father was a director who was already well involved with people. He got his first breaks on Mary Tyler Moore's show because he was connected. He was given opportunities from other people that he was already known by because of his father. And also, especially like back then, decades ago, back in, the 50s and 60s, the industry was also different then too. But the problem still remains with our industry today. It really is about who you know to break into the industry. And fortunately, he was already born into a world of privilege. And that's what I had a hard time connecting with, because he didn't seem, and this sounds very reductive, but he didn't seem like he struggled to get to where he was. He was already presented with opportunities, and yes, he ran with it, and he made a great career out of it. But he didn't. It doesn't feel like it was earned; it was given, and that's what I was having a hard time. I was like, man, because we're still struggling. We're still trying to like find our place in the world because we weren't handed opportunities. We don't have family related connections that get us onto the set and that give us the low hanging positions of being a production assistant and meeting this person who also gave us an opportunity down the road to direct another show, yada yada yada. So, and that's where all the name dropping was starting to bother me. I was like, okay, I get it. People. They gave you opportunities. Congratulations. And I had a hard time because our industry is ran by white males, and it still is.
I mean, the world.
The world.
You don't have to just say
everything.
The industry.
You're right, but like this, it definitely shows where his privilege definitely helps him.
Yeah, I'll back up just for a moment for myself. I think when you talk about the name dropping, there's certain instances where it's like, hey, by the way, I lived next to this person and we went to baseball games. It's like, first off, that's not even related to the TV show you're talking about. So I don't think you need to do that name drop, right? So I will agree with you there. You know, I think there's a sense in me that I agree with you that he was handed, you know, because of his father, and he doesn't try to hide it, so I'll give him credit there. But he did put in the work, but obviously he was afforded those opportunities, whereas other people, you know, just aren't. Now, I don't know, like, it would be very interesting to, like, really look at his life and see how many people he was able to uplift within marginalized communities and really just also just tutor and mentor. Because there did seem that loving side to him, that he wanted to really uplift people as much as possible. I just don't know how much of it was conscious on a more equitable level, let's say. But at the same time, I imagine that he didn't put a lot of that stuff, although it seems weird with, you know, in contrast to name dropping, that it would have been too braggadocious to be like, and listen, you know, I increased, you know, our sets used to be 93% white men, but, you know, by the time I was done, it was 53% only white men, you know, so like, it would have been weird to like, not that he even has those kind of statistics, but, and the point that I'm making, you know, whether or not it's this book or whatnot, I don't, and I guess it's easier obviously for me to say, but I don't necessarily have an out and out, what's the word that I'm looking for? Discontent against privilege, as long as you use it in a way that benefits others, right? Like the point of privilege is not to necessarily negate it, but okay, if you're afforded that, how can you help spread it? And so I don't know. Maybe
right, no,
that's
I agree. And
yeah.
like, and that's what I said. It's like he's made an amazing career out of it, and we appreciate it. It's like that's why we're reading the book. That's why we appreciate Friends and Will and Grace. And like he's made iconic shows that no one will touch, because his fingerprints is on the, you know, just the precedent of how we do sitcoms these days, multi-camera even back then. But what I do love, and I don't mean to like bash him, but like what I do love about what he brought to this, that like really made me think, I was like, oh no, he's absolutely right, was the importance of chemistry on screen. And like that's why they call it chemistry test. But like how important that is for every show. You know, Sam and Diane were the main pinnacle relationship stories of Cheers. That's why that show was so important. But even when Diane left and Rebecca came in, love Kirstie Alley. I mean, I grew up with Kirstie Alley, and I cried the day she died. It was awful. But like the importance of why we have to fall in love with characters. If they're likable, if they get along with the crew and the cast members, then you know you have a good show. If the people themselves, the actors themselves, are not good people, the show's going to tank. And I mean, he really went into Rob Schneider, so which was like really a surprise, but also kind of not surprised. But that translates, because even when you had Friends, you had Ross and Rachel; they were iconic. And then when you have Will and Grace, and you like their friendship and the fact that they can finish each other's sentences, you know, just to have this natural shorthand and relationship with your co-stars that translates in real life and on screen. That's what makes the show memorable. It's like that's why the Cheers cast they all work. That's why Friends still works today, because they are all still family members. They're basically family. Like you see them outside of the show years later, and they're still treating each other like family. It's like that's why these shows still resonate, because on a human level we can connect with them and feel for them and empathize with them. And I really love the fact that he stressed the importance of chemistry, because if you don't have it, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and to expand upon that further, not that like it was an out and out requirement, but certainly later on in his career, he made the emphasis, like his walkaway clause. Like if he didn't like the set, he could walk away for no reason. And so, of course, in order to have a successful show, you needed good chemistry. But also he emphasized that for the people that worked on it, right? So even though the cast is obviously the people that are going to be on screen. You're spending a lot of hours with these people, and if it's a successful show, that's 10 years of your life. You don't want to work with shitty people. You and I know firsthand like what it is to work with people you like and what it's like to work with people you don't want to work, especially those long hours and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I agree, and I'm glad that he found overall his people, and I think we all try to do the same. Now, obviously, we could talk about anecdotes and all that good stuff till we're blue in the face, but overall, I think we're both saying that it's a little bit of a mix. Like we enjoyed a lot of parts, and even though we're being critical, it's because we just wanted to, we just wanted a certain specificity. But that's the hard part about writing memoir. You're serving a lot of masters, But right. I want to kick it to you for final thoughts before we get into what we've been reading outside of this.
I appreciate it. Like if he wrote another book that's basically just like the technical behind the scenes aspects of each show, I would read that more so than the whole covering of his autobiography, because I felt like he was trying to, like you said, trying to cater to a lot of different people. But I think for you and I on the technical, and I don't want to speak exactly for you, but I think we would appreciate more of the behind the scenes making of rather than covering his life. That I would totally read. I would totally love it. Going into this, like I do appreciate what he brought to the television and in all the different aspects of character development and the topics that he has covered within the decades of his career. You definitely see how he's impacted so many lives, and the relevance of which no one will be able to touch his sitcom career, because he is the godfather of sitcom.
Absolutely. All right, so lots to obviously cover with this book. If you have read it, comment down below and let us know what your favorite anecdotes are. Did you find it both enjoyable and frustrating like we did? If you've not read it, does this make you want to read it? Things of that nature. But as far as what we've been reading outside of our adventures here, it's just been a constant theme. Life's been busy for me in good ways, so nothing negative. But it's funny, my girlfriend Medina, she's reading my first novel, and there was one point, I read her a very short chapter, I think like chapter 6, and it was fun to reread my work, but also then get to speak it and read it to her. Listen, might not be the greatest novel, but the writing's pretty good, I gotta say. So,
Yeah.
But I will tell you a book that I do want to read that got back on my radar, Fahrenheit 451, because someone's talking about when we think of Fahrenheit 451, we think about the book burning. But with all things, you don't just get to the book burning. You start with first banning books and taking away history and stuff like that. And not for nothing, that seems a little relevant today. So,
yeah,
just like we read 1984, it feels like now's probably a good time to reread this and revisit
Ray
it.
Bradbury, I mean, he's iconic. That's a great story too, and also very, very still much relevant compared to how many years have passed since he's written that. I agree, that's a great book to read. Like you, life has been super, super busy. I've only read our next book for next month, and this book, busy in a good way. But I have been reading a lot of television scripts. I just recently read the newest episode. I was at a table read for Ted, which I think you'd appreciate.
Nice.
So just appreciating the script writing for television, and that's a sitcom, or well, no, I wouldn't say sitcom. That is a comedy show. So just the different types of genres of television when it comes to drama and comedy. It's still amazing thing to read, especially for our craft.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I will be the first to admit, as there's portions of the scripts that are written and it's dialogue and whatnot. I don't think I could do a comedy because I would read the script and I'd be like, I don't understand the humor. I have a sense of how to judge dramatic works versus like comedy. Like I don't know. I don't have the barometer for it to differentiate what's good, what's bad. Because as I was reading it, I was like, well, that doesn't seem funny. But when you watch it, I'd probably die laughing.
Yeah.
So anyway, so let's highlight then the books we will be reading. So go ahead and introduce your September pick.
Yes, September, we will be reading Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Stephen Daldry. It is a 9/11 story, but having read the book, yes, it's heavy, but there is a nice balance of humor, awkwardness, like and endearment, and with a nice touch of like covering a very, very hard moment in the American lives, but not going too over the head of like grieving all of it, but just like really, really spotlighting and highlighting the importance of why it's such a pivotal moment in American history.
Absolutely. Then in October, we have Brida by Paulo Coelho. You guys must know him most notably for The Alchemist. This is another book of his, lesser than that. I mean, not in terms of its quality, but it being famous. So I wanted to highlight that. Unless you pick something that I'm not aware of, November is TBD at the moment. Correct?
Still TBD.
Fair. Yep. And then for December, we will honor Emily Krempholtz, who I talked about my debut novel. She is the reason the writing is so good. She was my editor. She's really taught me how to write and elevate my writing. So she has her debut novel coming out, Violet. This Way is not a villain anymore. I'm excited to finally be able to read it. It comes out late November, so we'll do it for December. And, because I know Emily, there's above 50% chance that she'll be able to join us, whether just for an interview or for the actual book discussion itself. So looking forward to that.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
Well, thank you, Marisa. At Serafini TV is where you guys can keep up to date with all the things happening in Marisa's world. I'm at Svitek. We truly appreciate you, as always, for taking the time to tune in, read with us, discuss with us, all that good stuff. And see you